understanding how to play technically well, but that's just part of it. You have to have something else behind that communicates something to the people that are watching you and listening to you.
Well, I think it was one of the first people that you could actually use the word orchestration with as it relates to marching percussion. I mean, you heard timbre, you heard separation, and it was never about quantity of notes with him. It was about quality and appropriateness of notes and appropriateness of timbre. It was never that thing, let's just, see how many notes we can cram into this phrase.
Everything in the service of clarity more important than anything. And that's the way he wrote. That's why his writing was different from everyone else's. That was one of the reasons. That's why if you pulled up, in the parking lot and you heard Santa Clara's drumline playing, even if they didn't have their uniforms on, you knew it was them, not just from the tone and the timbre, but because you knew where they were in the music. You knew
Absolutely.
that you could tell what tune they were playing. This was not true of anybody else at the time.
The whole line just was like, we want to emulate that line. I said, well, that means we're going to have to use Ralph Hardman sticks. So we got the Ralph Hardman sticks in, and I, to this day, the same feeling I had when I put a Vic Firth Bolero in my hand, when I put a Ralphie model in my hand, I said, this is it. And that's the only stick I ever wanted to drum with. It felt great in my hand from day one. And I think it speaks volumes in how he created that stick and his level of musicianship as a rudimental percussionist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Marching Roundtable podcast. This is Tim Hinton, the beast of the marching arts. We're talking Ralph Hardman today and Sticks on Fire. Frank Dorritie's here. Frank, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm doing well. How are you, Tim?
I'm great. I'm so glad that you and Glen are here. Thank you for contacting me about this book that we're going to be talking about and for taking time to talk today. This is awesome. And Glen Crosby's here also. Glen, how are you?
I'm awesome. Just hanging out in Southern California, enjoying the beautiful weather close to the coast.
I love it. So everybody, before we started, Glen was talking about marching Blue Devils in 81. And I was sitting here thinking, well, I was in regiment in 81, but we'll get around to that, I'm sure, because we all kind of marched around the same time. David Starnes is here co-hosting with me today. David Starnes from the Gift of Music Foundation. How are you, David?
Hey, how's everybody doing tonight or today? It's good to see everybody.
Yeah,
good to see you, Glen and Frank. It's been a while.
It has been.
Yeah, it's really an honor to be on a program with David Starnes. I mean, he's the celebrity here. Okay, so
that's right. Well, actually, I think there's 3 celebrities and then this guy who's trying to host. But anyway, I'm really glad that you guys are here. So, Frank, you reached out to me about this wonderful new book, Sticks on Fire, about Ralph Hardman. I got to tell you, I read it. I loved it. I thought it was full of interesting stories, quotes, Ralphisms, all kinds of cool stuff. So, Frank, how did this happen? Let's talk about this.
Well, a few months ago, Ralph had to go into assisted living, and he is no longer able to work. I mean, the story is the real deal is he had a couple of strokes that affected his memory, and he's beginning to develop Alzheimer's as well. So he really can't work the way he had been working. He can't judge. He can't write. He can't teach. However, that doesn't mean he can't still have an effect on what we all do, and has had an effect for years. So we thought, Glen and I thought, if there were a book about Ralph, it keeps his profile present in the industry. And one of the things it will do is promote the profile again of his line of drumsticks, which, by the way, are, there you go. They are, and I didn't know this when we started out, because Ralph won't tell you this, but they are, in fact, are the best-selling signature sticks in the world. And that's
and
kind
that's
of hard to
saying
get your head around.
It is. Yeah.
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 Well,
Yeah, and
I mean, well, look at it this
that includes drum set sticks. That's the best-selling
Yeah,
stick.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ralph has an advantage. He has taught everybody and written for everybody, and those people he taught are now teaching everybody, and they know that Ralph makes a drumstick, or at least Vic Firth makes a drumstick with Ralph's name on it. And I would hasten to point out that there are endorsements and there are endorsements, and so some endorsements are you lend your name to the company, they put it on a product, and that's the end of it. You get some notoriety because they advertise, and they get some credibility because perhaps what you do is good. Okay. And that's the end of the relationship. Now, with Ralph, it's different. With Ralph, I came to find out he was instrumental in actually developing the stick itself. So what kind of wood should we use? Well, we need to use hickory. What kind of bead should it have? Should it be a barrel? What kind of balance should it have? What kind of shoulder? All of these technical things Ralph had direct input into. And I'm going to toss this over to Glen because he knows a lot more about that than I do in terms of the stick characteristics.
Yeah, Glen, hold that stick back up and talk about it. Tell us more about it.
Well, Ralph was the first signature stick. I don't know if it was just the marching arts or in general, but goes back to like 1990, I believe, 91 or so. Yeah, but you can see, barrel tip, shoulder comes down, it tapers. It takes a little bit longer taper. But these things, I mean, for me, I've gone through a lot of different sticks. The thing that I still love about Ralph's stick is that it just moves freely in your hand. That's the one thing I think if I was going to try and sell it, is just basically when you play with these sticks, it will do what you want. There's some sticks that are like front heavy or just the weight is distributed differently. I prefer a stick that I can actually rebound in my hand, so I can tell it what to do and it will do it. I don't have to work extra hard to get the stick to come back with a rebound, so it flows. And that's always from Ralph basically is like everything needs to be comfortable, flows. I know he checked with a lot of players before he came up with the final design too. He was smart enough to go to the students and say, well, how does this feel? So these things still feel as good to me as any other stick. They just float in your hands. It's comfortable and it does what you want it to do. Right. That's the main.
And that's really part of his ongoing legacy is that he's left us with something. Okay. Ralph's not gone. Okay. But this is something that's going to stay present, I think, for a long time. I mean, 500 years ago, a cat named Stradivarius made a violin. It's still the best violin. This may very well be the best marching stick for all time. And it has to do with the fact that he personally got interested in it. But it's part of his the way he does everything. Ralph throws himself into things 120% all the time. And so the reason, to get back to your question, why the book was, well, let's not let people forget about Ralph just because he's not on the scene right now, and just because he can't judge WGI indoor percussion, just because he's not going to be doing clinics and going to Japan and all of that business. Let's let people appreciate what he actually did, and also the fact that not only was he a great teacher, but he was a scientist. He was a philosopher. He's many things, but he's also a human being. And he had a personal life, and he had an upbringing in L.A. and as a kid growing up down the street from the Jackson 5, in a bad neighborhood, and somebody put him in he saw the Los Angeles Police Department youth band because his parents used to take him to parades. There used to be a lot of parades, of course. We all went to those, but here they come down the street, and there are a bunch of little kids. And they're playing the theme from Dragnet, bum ba bum bum ba bum bum. And Ralph told me just a couple of days ago when I saw him, he said, "Man, that just went right through me. I thought that was the hippest, cool." He said they had about 20 French horns, bum ba ba woo bum ba bum ba ba. He said, "I got to do this. I got to do this." So his experience, we think of Ralph as this icon that maybe dropped down out of the clouds or something at some point. No, he went through the same process that almost all of us did, but he went through it with a passion that was just incredible, and wanted to know every single detail about everything. And that's the kind of person he is, and that's the kind of person that gets profiled, hopefully in the book, and that this will energize his students, many of whom are grandparents now, of course, but and the band director people. I'm especially interested in reaching out to the band community. The drum corps people all know who Ralph is. They immediately jumped on this book. I don't have that same kind of background with bands. Yeah, I judge a lot of bands, but I'm not a household name like Ralph is in marching band percussion, and I'm very interested in getting those people to appreciate, what his ongoing sort of legacy and the fact that he appreciates that.
Let me just step in for a second too, just to make a point about his health. We still talk to him regularly. I still have great conversations with him. I know Frank does. He's forgetful, but whenever I talk to him, we laugh. And that's going to be, part of what my goal is every time I do chat with him. And we have so many core memories that it's always a good conversation. And he'll bring up stuff, which I'm glad, like the long-term memory still, he'll bring up some things and I'll just start cracking up. So we always had our own language that no one would understand if they heard us talk. It'd be like, what are you guys even talking about? So that still continues all the time. I just talked to him on Saturday morning for a while too. So I try and talk to him as much as I can. And he's doing okay. I just know that, the conversations that Frank and I especially have with him are still hilarious. None of that has changed. And at one point I did tell him, it's like, hey man, no matter what, you and I are going to laugh every time we talk. And he's like, yes, we are. So I just want to make that point that, things are, it's not great, but still, we still have great conversations with him. And he's still the same person, in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, he's definitely still Ralphie, and he definitely uses he has his own vocabulary. There is a Ralph speak. There is a sort of a lexicon of terms that I don't know if Ralph came up with them or they were from the neighborhood or a combination of it, whatever. But we were at a show one time judging in Utah, a big marching band show in Utah, and he's sitting next to me, and somebody played just a really lush moment, and he turned to me and he said, "Man, they really know how to play those boogie-doos." And I didn't need an explanation. I know what a boogie-doo is now. A boogie-doo is a beautiful lyrical phrase, that's delivered, extremely well. But he has these terms. He's, cheese dogs, well, that's pretty good, but it's really just a bunch of cheese dogs. Well, cheese dogs, that's a lot of notes in your drum part that, you kind of jam in there for a certain kind of momentary effect, but they're not necessarily musical,
Oh no, he would talk about explaining how to play a perfect like pianissimo buzz roll is like tearing silk. Little things like that. There's tons of those.
Yeah.
You guys are bringing up so many things. I mean, Ralph has been in my life longer than he knows it. And you talk about the advent of the stick, and as a percussionist, I remember when I was in high school and college, and I loved playing with Vic Firth Generals and Vic Firth Boleros. And I remember when I was in college, I remember saying to somebody, if somebody would ever come out with a stick that felt as good in my hand as the Bolero does for a marching stick, would be on another planet. So this was 1990, maybe 91. I was teaching a drum corps down in Montgomery, Alabama, Southwind, and I was their percussion caption head. And we switched over to Premier drums. And I did the gray stain with the white trim because the Blue Knights had just done the same thing in blue stain and a white trim. And the whole line just was like, we want to emulate that line. I said, well, that means we're going to have to use Ralph Hardimon sticks. So we got the Ralph Hardimon sticks in. And I, to this day, the same feeling I had when I put a Vic Firth Bolero in my hand, when I put a Ralphie model in my hand, I said, this is it. And that's the only stick I ever wanted to drum with. It felt great in my hand from day one. And I think it speaks volumes in how he created that stick and his level of musicianship as a rudimental percussionist, because, just like Glenn said, it allows you to do things the touch, the sensitivity, the lift. You're not downstroking with that stick. It feels like a concert stick in your hand. I felt that way every time I played with it. And you put another stick in your hand, not to go off the rails here with another vendor, but it just doesn't feel the same. I had to change my approach in the way I played when I would put another stick in my hand. And I think that just speaks volumes to Ralph. Frank, speaking of the judging thing, I was in Virginia judging a marching band show, and I was doing general effect or something, and Ralph was judging percussion. And I will never forget this. I tell this Ralph story all the time. This band was doing a Batman show, and they got to the Batman theme, the one that we all know, the Adam West Batman theme. And in the front ensemble, they put this little bitty kid, like an elementary kid, in a little motorized Batmobile, and here he comes cruising across the front sideline, and I couldn't even get it out of my mouth. And Ralphie goes, "Hey, hey, hey, Batman!" And the whole press box heard it. We all cracked up. It nearly had to stop judging, but you're right. I mean, his little isms, as a marching band judge, there's nobody like him. Nobody like him.
Well, he's so in the moment, which is ironic now because he does have problems with staying in the present, right now. But he is so legitimate. He's so real, in the moment. I learned more music from him than anybody, and I've been around some pretty heavy people. But Ralph was my roommate for about 5 years in the early 80s. And when he moved in to this apartment we had in San Francisco, in came all his drums. Now, we weren't teaching together. We had taught Santa Clara in 1980, but by this time I was doing the Bridgman or somebody else, and he was still with Santa Clara. But all these drums come into the house, and I'm walking around the place and picking up things and whatever. And so I pick up claves, so yeah, claves, yeah. And I start going, yeah. and he says, you're a good musician. You have a pretty good time. He said, but it's not about the time. It's about the tone. And I said, what? It never occurred to me that drums had tone. I was a drum corps guy. I just thought drums they're metric and they line up and that's what they do. Tone, really? Okay. He said, for example, you take that clave. He said, first thing you got to do when you play an instrument is hold it correctly. So I'm gripping it like it's a baseball bat or something, And he says, no. You take your hand, go like this, make a cup, set it in like that. You don't even have to grip it. Just let it lay there. And don't hit it hard, and don't hit it in the middle. 2/3 of the way up, and pretty soon you can hear the difference between that and if I was holding it really tight. Dead sound, right? I realized, wow. Okay, so now my whole musical thing, I've just made a leap, and 5 minutes later, he's talking to me about, well, there's the 2/3 that you just played. He said, but then there's the forward Cuban. The what? The forward Cuban. He said, come on, man, you're Tito Puente's producer. You better know that.
That's right. You got to know the difference between the son and the Roomba clave.
Okay, so there's another Ralphie story, but always the teacher, and it didn't matter if he was teaching somebody older than him. I'm older than he is, but it didn't matter if he was teaching somebody older, younger, little kid. Glenn, you said earlier something about somebody says something to you and you remember it, right? So if you've ever seen Ralph with little kids, you realize that he can teach anybody. He could teach a pineapple how to play if it showed up at rehearsal. Okay. And I remember somebody telling me something one time, and you guys all know this name. Most people watching this will not know this name, Dr. Bernard Baggs. But Dr. Baggs was the chief judge of DCI for a long time. And I told him at one point, I think I really want to be a music teacher. I mean, a real music teacher in a school, not just an instructor in a drum corps. I want to, so if I get to that, what should I do? Dr. Baggs was the head of fine arts education at Bergenfield. He had taught Donald Angelica. He had Fred Sanford worked for him. I mean, he's the man. I said, what should I remember? He said, well, he said, if I have to put it in a sentence, he said, it would be this. It would be on the lookout for Mozart. and know what to do with him when he shows up.
Mhm.
And that really stuck with me, because in the beginning I thought that meant, oh, look for some kid who's a prodigy. But it doesn't just mean that. It means if you're in the room with Mozart, you better know what to do. You better know to pay attention. So sitting in the room with a clave and Ralph, I was in the room with the Mozart of the clave. And so that came back to me right at that moment. So, oh, he didn't just mean some young kid and guide him properly, et cetera, et cetera. He meant pay attention when Mozart shows up. I've been in the room with Mozart a couple of times. Ralph is a Mozart. The late Robert W. Smith was a Mozart. I was in a room with him one time and we were just chatting, and I'm realizing, oh man, it's the teacher part. It's the griot. It's the African griot kind of storyteller, which circles us back to that expression thing, David, where you don't just teach the mathematics, you don't just teach the alphabet, you teach the meaning of the story. So there are many right?
And Mozart only sounds like Mozart, and I think I think Ralph only sounds like Ralph.
Absolutely.
I remember I sat down with him. This was years ago, but it was life-changing to me to hear what he wrote for Santa Clara in 1984 for their percussion feature. And it was so concert percussion oriented, so tasteful. And the first time I was at finals in 84, and I remember listening to it going like, that doesn't belong on a drum corps field. And then 2 or 3 years after that, the more I listened to it, I thought, man, the guy's so far ahead of his time. Like musicianship wise, you put that on a field nowadays, and that's going to be big points musically, because this is so far ahead of its time, writing like nobody else wrote. And I was fortunate that he wrote Lassiter High School shows several years, and I'm down here in Atlanta, and got to sit with him and talk to him. But it was always for me the things that you think like, well, I would have written this, but then you hear what Ralph writes, and like inside the beats and outside the beats, and how he winds up back to the downbeat. It's just incredible, the musicianship, but the thought process, like you say, behind the musicianship, it was always about creating an experience, a journey, dare I say, horizontally. It wasn't vertical like a lot of people wrote. He wrote very horizontal, and he used to talk to me about listen to the melody when you write. Listen to the melody, find the SATB in the wind score, and adapt that to the snare tenor, the bass, the front ensemble, and even different textures within that. But listen to the horizontal, not the vertical. And my writing completely changed after that. It was a big
absolutely. I
influence.
remember. I mean, I'm from the school of Ralph. He's my main musical mentor. So when I first started working with him was in '87. He hired me in the middle of the summer, or like in June, because I had taught cadets in '85 and '86, and then we got together. I was hanging out in the Concord area, and I wasn't really teaching, and he got wind of that, and he said, all right, come on, let's go have dinner. So I went into San Francisco. This is actually pretty funny. We went to a really nice, I think it was a Chinese restaurant, but anyway, we're sitting there, and I was like 24, 25 and not real cultured in terms of food or wine or anything. So he orders some deep fried calamari, which I had no idea what it was. So we're sitting there, and we I knew him from being in Blue Devils and him teaching Santa Clara. But this is the first time we actually kind of hung out, like actually just me and him talking. And so we ordered some deep fried calamari. So I'm like, oh, cool, grab a big old bite. And I go, oh man, this is really great. What is this? He looks at me and goes, squid. And it was hilarious because I looked right back at him and said, no, it's all right. It's already down the hatch, man. That's not going to work on me. So right away, I was going, well, this is going to be hilarious.
Squid, that was squid, buddy.
Yeah, serious. It was so funny. So we talked, we hung out for a couple hours. We said, all right, let's do this. And he hired me in June in '87. And then the next year, I was a tenor tech and kind of worked with snares and tenors at cadets, but and same thing with in '87. I kind of wandered around the battery ensemble. But once '88 hit and we got on the road, I found myself on the road the first week of tour by myself. There was no other staff. It's not like the corporate, the conglomerate.
Wait, Glenn, let's clarify which corps you're with.
Santa Clara.
Okay, just want to make sure everybody knew where
Oh,
we
no,
are.
absolutely.
We're in the
Yes,
who's,
it's
where, when.
87, 88 SCV. So I was there from 87 to 90. Then we both left at the same time. So
you're on the road by yourself.
Yes, there was me and a cymbal instructor. I think that whoever was teaching the pit got fired right before we left on tour because they started messing around with the music too much. It's just something you don't do. You make the music. I knew my role was to make his music come to life, and I accepted my role. So I found myself on the road, on our way to Denver, and I'm going, what am I going to do? I even told Ralph. It was funny because I'm in the parking lot before we left on tour. He was going to be back in a week, and I'm going, what do you want me to do? Like, what am I supposed to do? He looks at me and goes, man, shut up and go teach. I was like, oh, okay. And that's the way it was with him. Our whole relationship was based on this kind of open, honest dialogue. And it was just kind of funny. The entire 40 years that we've hung out, it's just this constant, completely honest dialogue. And we've talked about many times just being completely honest and how difficult it is. So he's like the person that I could talk to about anything. We could converse about anything. But anyway, back to being on the road, all of a sudden I'm going, what the hell am I going to do? I'm looking at like these college music majors in the pit standing in front of me. I'm going, well, I better have something to say. So I just got up on the podium. There's no drum major. I just conducted percussion ensemble rehearsals from the podium. And I started listening to the way he wrote. Like I had to, it was a lot more intense. So I'm going back to, melody. And all of a sudden you could hear from top to bottom because he was the only person really back then that was writing everything. So that's where I learned ensemble, was by listening to his music and being basically thrown in the deep end with my hair on fire going, I had no idea what I was doing, but I just listened. And that's how I ended up learning about ensemble. And eventually once he saw that I could do something, he's like, all right, go do full ensemble. I'm like, well, what do you mean go do full ensemble? Go do ensemble. Like there was no conversation about it. He's like, he obviously saw something in me that I had no idea was there. And he's just like, look, just go do it. And then he kind of laughed. He's like, see, it's no big deal. And that turned into, I'd like to be incognito on the road. And like, if no one knew I was teaching, I was okay with that. And he wasn't okay with that. He's going, no, people need to hear what you have to say. So we would be doing clinics constantly, 88, 89, and 90 on the road. And a lot of the times right before the clinic, he would just go, you're doing it. I'm like, no, I'm not. He's going, yeah, you are. And then he would just disappear. It became a thing where at one place I saw we were getting ready to finish rehearsal. We had to go to the clinic. And I saw him like walking out of the stadium going, no way, you're not getting away with this time. Like ran after him. And by the time I got to the end of the stadium, he was gone. I was like, damn it. But he would push me out in public and say, no, man, just go. He trusted me. He actually said that, and no disrespect meant to any other people that work with him, but he told me one time, he said, you're the only person I've ever really trusted with my music. Mm-hmm. And that made me feel great. Yeah. I was like, okay, because I knew my role was to bring his music to life. And I learned so much in that process about tone, touch, expression, and still playing clean. I mean, we tried to not sacrifice anything, but it was a holistic approach. And understanding the style of music and trying to get a drum line to understand how to play time or a different kind of time or a different style, and not just having, a technique program that was like inside the box. And that's the only thing that you do. Your vocabulary was limited to that. So I learned so much just from being in front of his music and then talking with him. It was like, what do you want from this? And he would tell me what he wanted and I would just go do it.
Well, I think it was one of the first people that you could actually use the word orchestration with as it relates to marching percussion. I mean, you heard timbre, you heard separation, and it was never about quantity of notes with him. It was about quality and appropriateness of notes and appropriateness of timbre. It was never that thing, let's just, see how many notes we can cram into this phrase. And I remember many, many times watching him rehearse, whether it was with drum corps or with marching band, he would actually take notes out of the percussion book because he would look at me and say, it's hampering the ability to have the winds to be heard correctly. And it's not supporting anything. So that needs to go. And you would hear the transparency happen right in front of your eyes. He just had amazing, amazing years.
Yes, absolutely.
We saw the big picture all the time. And, and that's kind of what you just mentioned about taking notes out. That's a Sondheim thing, everything in the service of clarity more important than anything. And that's the way he wrote. That's why his writing was different from everyone else's. That was one of the reasons. That's why if you pulled up, in the parking lot and you heard Santa Clara's drumline playing, even if they didn't have their uniforms on, you knew it was them, not just from the tone and the timbre, but because you knew where they were in the music. You knew
Absolutely.
that you could tell what tune they were playing. This was not true of anybody else at the time. Yeah. I should point out that this is the book, but the book is not a book. It's an ebook. So you can click on a variety of links in the book to hear things. So you can hear, for example, his writing samples. You can hear an interview with him that he does with Dean Westman of the Bluecoats, where Dean asks him, okay, so your process, it must have been different. He said, how do you write? You're doing Russian Christmas music or something. I mean, how do you write a drum part to that? And and make it sound like it actually belonged there from the beginning. And Ralph said, and I'm just paraphrasing, but Ralph said, well, when I'm writing for something like that, I sit down with the score and I imagine that there's a guy in a room with a candle and a quill and a little bit of ink and a big giant piece of paper, and I look down the score and I say, okay, what here is the most important thing? What needs to come out? Okay, so if Tchaikovsky had a 9-man snare line, what would he write for them? So in other words, he inhabited the music. It wasn't just what fits; it's what really belongs. And that was his approach, and that's why, David, as you say, it was linear.
Yes,
his approach was linear and melodic.
Yeah.
And most people still, particularly even today, you'll find that there are people that don't do that. However, it's much more prevalent now. The melodic and the linear approach is much more prevalent now. Why? Ralph. That's why. Because not only was it successful, it's correct musically, and it began to become rewarded, musically. So when a Paul Rennick or a Colin McNutt or Scott Johnson, write. Those people are immersed in Ralphism. They don't sound like Ralph. They're not trying to sound like Ralph. They will never sound like Ralph, nor will he sound like them. But you can hear the lineage there.
Yeah, simply put, he would just serve the big picture. We always talk about that. Big picture was a huge thing that we talked about all the time. Everything has to serve the big picture, period.
Yep. Yeah, and Frank, to your point about bands, I think he really understood the dome environment. You'd go into RCA or you'd go into Lucas Oil, and his writing just, you didn't hear it until you got into a place where there wasn't any clarity, and then all of a sudden you heard the clarity, and he just knew what was going to happen. Just an amazing, and he didn't write episodically. There was always a conversation. I always felt like there was a conversation happening, whether it was in segments of the battery or whether it's a front ensemble to battery segment, or even like between the horns and the battery. But there was a conversation happening, which was really, really fun. My time of judging DCI, if I was ever on the field and his writing was happening, I made sure I got myself in a zone where I could hear that conversation, because that was different than anything that was being done back then.
Well, I want to mention that, Frank, I love that you talked about these links to hear things. And I think this is one of the great things about an ebook, right? And I thought it was so brilliant that you guys did this book. Everybody, of course, you can buy this ebook. You can read about his history and his biography. You can hear about the Ralphisms. You can see lots of people that give wonderful personal stories about their interactions with him. It's all really interesting. But one of the coolest things, perhaps for sure, Frank, is that you guys have these clips where you can hear his music and you can hear him talking about it. And like that's great. I love that you included that. It made the book sort of come to life.
Well, that was Glen's idea. He really put us on to that.
Glen, let's talk about that. Why you wanted to make sure and include that.
Well, you can't really talk about Ralph without listening to his music. I mean, that's ultimately, you want to hear. I mean, no matter what, we can sit and talk about things forever, but sit and listen to that 84 drum solo. And I competed against that. That was my last year in Blue Devils, And I remember hearing it and going, wow, that is so different from what we're doing. And I remember they were beating us early on in the season. And, everyone, all the youngins in Blue Dog was like, how come they're beating us? They're not even playing. And I was like, because they're doing what they do better than we're doing what we do. Very simply. I was smart enough to look at that, being in Blue Devils and playing the 8 billion notes that we always had. But I was looking at that going, man, that is just completely different. And it's beautiful. And they're doing it really, really well. So everyone just kind of stopped going, oh, okay. And I was like, yeah, just how about we work on what we're supposed to be working on, not worry about them. Because what they're doing, they do really, really well. And going back, when Frank and I were talking, I was like, I know there's links to all this stuff. There's Little Green Men, when I worked with Ralph in 1993 at Blue Nights. We'll go there now for a second.
Yeah, that's a good story. Tell that story.
This is another example of the kind of relationship I have with Ralph. So I'm living up in Denver with him and Fred Sanford, actually, in their apartment. So Ralph is writing the percussion feature for 1993 show. It was kind of I forget, science show or a science fiction show or something.
Yeah, Planet Space or something.
Yeah, he was going to use, I think, Mercury from the planets for a percussion feature. And he kind of went, said, no, you know what? He said, we're going to do this. And he played this Steve Vai tune, Little Green Men. I was like, oh, holy moly. Just the time signatures in that were like off the chart. Just to be able to get comfortable with that was hilarious. But in the process of writing it, I was just hanging out one day, sitting on the couch, and he comes out. He must have been just kind of stuck on something. He goes, here, man, write this phrase. And he had never asked me to write anything. I strictly was his assistant. I worked on his music. He's like, here, write this phrase. So I was like, I kind of was a little shocked. I go, okay. So I was being real careful, and I sat down, and this is all by hand too. So I wrote the phrase, I'm like, all right, cool. So I go hand it to him, and I'm sitting on the couch, just kind of hanging out, watching TV. And all of a sudden he comes back. He has the chart in his hand. He walks up, and I look up, and he's 6'6". He walks up, drops the chart on me, and goes, we can do better than that, and just walks away. And the funny thing was, I didn't flinch. I was like, okay. So I just got back, cleared my brain, didn't think anything, and just wrote an entire phrase and handed it back. And he's like, yeah, that's more like it. Like that was the simplicity of, it's like, I wasn't offended. It's like, I know, the fact he asked me to write something was cool, but it was just funny how, he just dropped like this, 4 or 5 pieces of paper on my chest. We can do better than that.
Well, I do want to say that's one of the things that struck me when I read the book. And when I met Ralph, it struck me then was that he seemed to have this ability to be super clear and never offend. It's like he was just got along with everybody. And I know I'm sure he offended people. It's because it's drum corps and band and all that stuff. But
we all have.
Right. We've all been there. It's part of it. But my point is, he seemed to have this way of interacting with people that sort of disarmed them, right? Is sort of what you're describing?
Yes. Actually, that's an easy one too. I wonder if that's, I've really thought a lot about why did I get along with him so well? And we're kind of the same that way. It's all a delivery. I've been told by other people, it's like, how is it you can walk up and say this, to a group, and they're like, yeah. And I walk up and say something and give them a compliment. And they're like, they look at me like I have 3 heads. I'm going, it's all in the delivery. You can say whatever you want. I think part of it is there can't be a mean spirit behind what you're saying. There's no ego behind it. It's just about getting what's right and being truthful and honest about it. And once people understand that about you, then it's easy to communicate. And there's a line of communication that's like, all right, we understand what you're trying to say. We know it's not about, making you look bad or good. It's about serving the big picture. Going back to that again.
Yeah, well, it actually goes right back to what you were saying earlier, because he wasn't worried about his part of the show. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, does it serve the show? Does it serve the music? That's taking the ego out of it. We all run into those problems where it's all about the drum line and not the show. And then, man, you're cooked. You know? So that's what you're sort of describing. It was always about the music and the show and what the show needed. And all the greats, I think, do it that way.
Yeah. And he wanted to make sure that the students loved what they were playing too. That was part of his process also. He wanted to make sure everyone loved what they were playing. But yeah, I think about times when it would be me and him at a rehearsal and just going back and forth and running around, and this nonverbal communication that we had going on. It was just fun. It was super intense and crazy, like the drum corps days were back then. But at the end of the day, about his personality, everyone knew that he loved them for what they were doing, for the sacrifice that we were making. And I've definitely latched onto that as far as like, and even going back to anytime small kids were around a warm up, he would always invite them right in and let them play on the instruments or get them to listen. And you see little kids dancing around. It's like, yeah, there's that curiosity that I think both of us still like to try and have, as we get older. I try and maintain that myself too. I have a 1-year-old grandson now who he has a little Remo drum. I was playing with him yesterday, and he's already getting started. And just talking to him, I hold him. I play good. I was playing some Indian music for him yesterday. There's a vocalist who I love right now, so I play him these tunes, and I'll hum along with him. He just starts humming along with me. And a couple of times he started moving a little bit and started to catch the groove a little bit. And it's like there's nothing better than being able to pass that on to a 1-year-old, all the way up to people that are maybe my same age as me or older. That right. I'll never lose that, and I owe that to Ralph, basically.
Yeah. Well, Ralph was a trendsetter without even trying. That was one of the coolest parts about him. Like he did things, seemed like he did things for the first time before a lot of people did it. And then everybody latched onto that. But he wasn't trying to do that. He was just trying to be Ralph, one, but he was also trying to be a musician. And I think, in the early 80s, 70s, and 80s, percussionists got this, drummers got this, vibe that it was all about how much chops you had. And Ralph went, the other way. Going back to that 84 percussion thing, I remember saying, and talk to me about that sparkle, the pink sparkle snare drums. And he looked at me, he goes, we're the Champagne of drum corps. And just said it with the straightest face in the world.
That's great.
Well, listen, everybody,
can you maybe, Glenn, maybe you could address the, or David, maybe you might be a better position to do this. Talk about that 84 drum solo, why it was different, and what was, the rest of the field, everybody else. Here's your 2 minutes drum line. Go out there and cheese dog it. Okay, let's have every trick you can possibly play. Let me hear you play as loud as you can. Let me hear you play as forcefully and with as much testosterone as you can muster. And then Ralph comes and does this other thing.
It was a scherzo. I mean, it felt like a scherzo. The first time I heard it, there was a lot of space. He played with a lot of space. He played with a lot of lift. I think there was a lot of opportunities for breath. Like you would hear, a phrase that had a lot of metallic kind of lift to it, a lot of buzz rolls in it. The rolls of the tenors and the rolls of the bass drums were more complementary and not impactful. The melody I can still hear: bing bum bum bum, zing bum bum bum, bum 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 bum. Whoever would hear that melody and go, yeah, we're gonna write a drum corps book on that. It did not fit the mantra for that. The tuning, I need to talk about that. The tuning of the battery, the ensemble, completely different than what you heard. Really, really wet snare sound, really resonant tom sound. You use a lot of puffies as far as implements go. I remember hearing that. A lot of that's when crotales really became, because front ensembles weren't really a thing until around 83 or 84, maybe a little bit in 82. But you started to hear crotales, and you started hearing layers in the front ensemble that I felt like the whole composition was really emanating from the metallics and from the front ensemble and melodics, and not the battery. That the battery was more of an accompaniment rather than being the center focus. But just a complete, and even the approach of the performers, they completely changed the way. And I think that was one of the things that earmarked that for me, is like, you don't have to downstroke in drum corps. There's still this beautiful lift and taste and sensitivity, different implements.
Yeah.
One of the beautiful things you just said. Oh, I'm sorry, Glenn, go ahead.
No, I mean, he's always been a student of music. I mean, and listening to what was happening at that point. I mean, me being in Blue Devils, I know what we did for the 4 years that I was there. And I know that I get bored with stuff real fast, and I need something new. And Ralph is obviously the same way. I mean, to go in a completely different direction like that, there's a lot of risk in that. But he didn't care, because still he was serving the big picture, as we keep saying. But the idea of just doing something completely different to like change up, the way things were in the entire activity. It's just, he was a musician first, and you're bringing your sensibility to what you're doing. and making it a different ensemble, which I think I've tried to do, with any group that I've been with too. But he was always just a musician, and he would get bored, and just want to do something that's new. I remember, I lived with him for a year in San Francisco, right around that earthquake in 1989. And one time we're sitting down on the couch. He's sitting at either end of the couch. He's going, all right, man, check this out. He's going, listen to it, but don't try and figure it out. Just listen. And it was something, some Brian Eno thing, like music from an airport or something. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it was bizarre. And we just sat there, and I just remember like being, my eyes closed, listening, and got done. And I opened my eyes and I looked at him and said, I get it. He's like, all right, cool. And we just kind of went on with whatever we were doing. But there was many listening sessions of all kinds of different styles, crazy time signatures, all kinds of ethnic percussion from around the world, Indian music, which is a favorite of mine. If you want to talk percussion, there's all kinds of good stuff to learn from that. But yeah, he was just, he was a student of music. And if there's something new, if he could bring it to the table in this, crazy activity that we're all part of, he would do that.
Yeah, I want to jump on
I
that.
think he looked forward in that 84 show also because he knew what was coming after musically, and it was all orchestral music. I think that was Copeland the Tenderland maybe that year. But
Yes.
he looked forward to like what was coming and set that up, gave us that journey, and he maybe emanated that journey. So
it's funny. I remember you bring up the Tenderland. I remember this is kind of hilarious because Blue Devils had beaten Santa Clara, I don't know how many years in a row at their home show. And I remember being kind of off the end zone, and they played the percussion feature, and then they got to the end of the Tenderland. And man, I just stopped and went, well, our streak is over tonight. Like I knew that we got beat. Blue Devils got beat the first time by Santa Clara at Santa Clara's home show in a bunch of years. But I remember how beautiful that sounded from the end zone, like up far away. And I was like, oh boy, that's something. It had a vibe. Another thing about Ralph always brought to the table is like, just playing notes doesn't mean anything. It's got to have something behind it, which, honestly, it was a weird little story. I spent a couple of days with Boston Crusaders in the summertime when they came out to California. And they asked me to talk to the percussion section at the end of the rehearsal. So I talked with them about how the last 4 weeks of the season should be. And I said, there's groups that can play technically really, really, really well. And sometimes that gets over, and they end up doing really well competitively. There's groups that can have this performance attitude that goes way over the top. But I said, but if you can combine those two things and have the best mechanics and understand how to bring something else to it that communicates to your audience that are paying money to come and see you, then that's undeniable. And I believe they just did that on Saturday because I watched from my home and I was like, oh man, that was exactly what they needed to do. It was obvious to me, but and that all comes from, hanging out with Ralph. It's just, there's big picture is about understanding how to play technically well, but that's just part of it. You have to have something else behind that communicates something to the people that are watching you and listening to you.
Yeah, and we spent quite a few moments here talking about that Santa Clara 84 drum solo. I just want to point out you can hear it in the book. You can click on that thing.
The link is there.
And everything we just said, you can formulate your own opinions about by virtue of being able to hear it. That was again Glen's great idea of putting audio links into this book, because there is no way to talk about it. You can't talk about music, that's crazy. You have to hear it. You have
we
to
didn't even say anything about the snare drum solo in the middle of the Scottish snare.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much taste involved in that. It's like, man, that's not an easy solo.
No.
Well, he liked to use a lot of different implements. The story is often told about, he actually used a garden weasel, one of those little trowel things that you can, that you dig up your garden with. And I remember the day that we bought that. I say we because I had to go to the hardware store on Irving Street in San Francisco, and Ralph and I were going to go to lunch. I said, well, I got to stop in the hardware store first, and then we'll go to lunch. So I go in and I'd get batteries or something. And all of a sudden I hear this sound coming from the back of the hardware store. And it's just like tinkle, 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 that kind of thing. And it's rhythmic, you know. He's got a rhythm going. He's got a groove going with a garden tool. And comes up to the front and he says, yeah, I think, we'll have this. We'll take the batteries, but we're taking this too. And I'm thinking, oh, he's gone around the bend now, you know. But that's how free he was. I mean, God, he was studying at the time. He was studying with Mary Ellen Donald, who was the Middle Eastern percussion lady who taught in San Francisco. David, you probably know that name. She's a blind percussionist.
Evelyn Glennie.
She's a PAS person and all of that.
Yeah.
But you know, he'd come home with these like, you know, fish head tambourines, you know, and sit on the couch and make these sounds and say, well, you can't use that in drum corps. You say, why not? Why not? And then I realized, well, I guess you can, because you got everybody leaning forward now because you took the drum solo down to a P, 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 P.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the man has no limits. I mean, he will, you know, he'll make anything. He's like Jerry Shelmer before him in a previous generation. He would use anything as a percussion instrument.
Well, it's funny you say that, Frank, because I think if I remember correctly, and I never saw it, but he told me this, I think he put funnels inside of those drums in '84. I think he had mounted funnels because it compressed the sound off the head down to the bottom head, and that's how he got that sound. But they were suspended funnels inside the shell.
I believe that's true.
Wow, he was cheating.
Well, so I love this conversation, guys. I think this has been so interesting, and we could probably sit here and talk about Ralph and tell Ralphisms and stories for the rest of the day, but we do need to start wrapping this up. But listen, everybody, here's the thing. This is all in the book, right? You can hear these things if you buy the ebook, and it has all the links, and you can listen, you can see the stories, you can read the Ralphisms, you can read the quotes. And I love that you guys have done this, Frank and Glenn. I think this is such a wonderful, honorable tribute to Ralph that's coming at the right time. Let's remember him, his legacy. I mean, obviously, all of the influence that he had on so many people and the direction of the activity. It's great to be reminded, and it's great. Listen, really, we can all do something for Ralph. And this is the bottom line, right? This book, we can all buy the book. It's going to help out Ralph, right? All this is going to him. Buy the sticks. Remind everybody. Tell everybody to read this. I really had a good time. I am the non-percussionist here, and of course, I knew Ralph and listened to his music and knew of his legacy, but I had a great time. So check it out, everybody, and especially click on those links and listen to all these things we're talking about. To finish this up, we're going to go around. I'm going to ask each of you to say one thing you want to say in closing. Anything you want to remind people of, or one final thing. By the way, of course, there's a link where you can buy the book at the Marching Roundtable where this podcast is located, or we'll have graphics out on social media that have the links there and the QR codes and stuff. David, I'll let you go first. What do you want to say in wrapping up about Ralph and his legacy as we finish this conversation?
I'm just honored to know Ralph. I'm honored to have been influenced, and I think as a kid that was coming through drum corps in the mid '80s, to watch the evolution of everything Ralph did, not only as a performer but as an educator and a writer. I just feel very, very lucky to have put that stick in my hand for the first time and to rub elbows with him through the early '80s and continue to be a friend of his. All the way through this. So love you, Ralphie, and wish you the best.
That's great. Glenn, what would you like to say as we're closing up the conversation?
Oh, yeah, just keep in your thoughts. I was hoping I'd get through this.
It's fine. It's a testament to what he means to all of us, and especially Glenn, such a close relationship.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, he's been my best friend for, 40 plus years. And this is difficult to see what he's going through. But at the same time, like I said, the conversations I have with him are still phenomenal, and it's still him. And we get to chat about lots of things over the last 40 years. Anything that you guys can do to help out.
Yeah, that's great.
It's been a long-term process, obviously, but buying the sticks, buying the book, there are tons of good stories in there and all kinds of quotes from people. When I was talking to Frank yesterday too, I was realizing how much he's done, and I knew all the stories. I mean, I realized a lot of the time that we spent together was really we're in the moment and we're moving forward all the time. So we didn't talk too much about the past things that he had done. But he's just Uncle Ralphie to my kids too. I mean, I have so many pictures of him with both my kids from the time they were born up until 5-6 years ago. And when he came to LA, this was his hideout. He would come and hang out with us, and we were just sitting yelling at the TV, talking, laughing, doing whatever. And my kids just know him as Uncle Ralphie. I've got pictures of my son, just kind of, they're both, him and Ralph are like laying on the couch. My son's got a Game Boy in his hand. He's kind of sprawled out over him, or, So yeah, I mean, he means more to me than I can express. So.
Well, thank you for doing this and for letting us all share through the book and through this conversation. Frank, I guess you're going to get the final word. What would you like to say as we're closing out the conversation?
Oh, I get to do the closer. Well, what we used to call in drum corps, hey, what are you guys playing for a Danny Boy this year?
That's awesome. I never heard that one. That's fantastic.
Well, that was a back east thing because 27th played Danny Boy for about 42 years in a row, and and it became just a cliche. Like, what are you doing for a Danny Boy? As I was getting ready to this morning to just set up the computer and meet with you guys, something occurred to me, and I'll just leave you with it's real simple. And then Ralph was aware of this. Ralph is aware that music gave him so much from the time he was a child and when he first latched on. So I thought, okay, music gave Ralph so much, and he returned the favor.
Yep.
And he's still with us, and you can still call him on the phone, and you can still talk to him, and he will laugh with you, and he will remember things from back when you interacted with him. He won't remember what you just said 5 minutes ago sometimes, but that doesn't matter. You can still call him and interact with him, and he's still here and he's still present, and what he did is going to stay with us for a very long time. So I want to just thank all of you guys for having enough interest to sit down today and talk about Ralph and give him his props.
Yeah. Can I say one last thing? One
of the course.
Conversations recently, I was talking with him. I was writing the chart for a high school, and I was kind of stuck on something. I don't remember what he said to me, but it was basically like he'd always say, just write what you hear. But he said something to me. And when we got done with the conversation, I went and sat down and just burned through the rest of the chart. So he still has the ability to help me out when I need it. Even the last few weeks, it was like, see, there it is. Nothing's changed about that.
No.
Yeah, it's part of your DNA now. I love that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, David and Glenn and Frank, this was really a fun conversation. And everybody get the book and support Ralph and keep playing on the sticks. And thank you, Ralph. Man, for all these gifts that you were all talking about that you gave us all. Thank you guys. It was a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
Take care.